What's up guys, KS here. Thanks for joining me today as always. When Centerfire Shooting Sports, my home away from home, announced that they'd become an STI dealer, I was intrigued. I didn't have any real-world experience with the brand and only knew them as a higher-end, custom 1911-2011 manufacturer. Many competition shooters run their tricked-out 2011s and seem to swear by them. I love 1911s, so I was on board, after some sweet talking from the guys at Centerfire. They had a Staccato C available in their first shipment, and the price was palatable, so I took the plunge. The C is designed as the carry alternative to most of their other offerings, weighing in at only 25.6 pounds. It's got attractive styling and an unusual design chemistry comprised of steel, aluminum, and polymer. STI states that it's the world's best shooting carry gun. It's a bold claim for sure. Now it's time to dive in and take a closer look at the Staccato C. Alright, we'll do a couple of quick side-by-sides with the Staccato C just so you can tell how it stacks up to other guns either in its category or in another popular category. Guys, this is a 1911 from Rock Island Armory. It's 10mm. I'm actually doing some testing on this. Videos to come, of course, with it at a later time, but I thought a more standard government model might be a really appropriate comparison between the two. And so you can start to appreciate just how small that Staccato C is. I mean, it really is a little bit smaller, no doubt about that. And then line these guys up, and it takes a while to turn these things around. That Rock Island is a big gun, no doubt about it. But again, a more standard 1911 style versus that Staccato C. Now your Rock Island's going to come in well over 40 ounces, whereas the Staccato C is going to be 25.6 ounces. So definitely a big difference there, but I bet a lot of you are curious because this is designed as a carry firearm to see how it stacks up against the likes of something like a Glock 19. And yes, we tend to compare a lot of guns to Glock 19s, but to be fair, it's a good place to do a comparison. So I'm not going to line it up beaver tail. I'm going to line it up at the back of the slide right there. And these guys are actually pretty close. That Staccato C is going to be 7.5 inches in length and 5.2 inches high. So these guys actually stack up really well. Now the Staccato C is going to be thinner for the most part, except at its widest point, 1.5 inches. That Glock's going to be about 1.2 inches wide. So very interesting comparison for sure. Now another interesting thing between these two guns, the Glock's going to be about 25.5 ounces, or sorry, 23.5 ounces versus 25.5 ounces on the Staccato. So there really isn't much of a difference. The biggest difference, of course, is going to be capacity, 15 rounds versus 8 rounds. So yeah, there's a difference for sure, but it's interesting to see how these guys stack up. Let's walk around the frame of the Staccato C for a moment or two. Of course, we always start with our grip texture, and the grip texture I actually like. Now, all of this whole piece here is a modular polymer piece. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along, but in terms of the texture, again, all polymer. I'm wheeling in some pictures because the video really can't do it justice. It's nice texture, but I would consider this very mild aggressive, if that makes sense. So it's definitely not going to beat you or your close up. I would actually like it to be a little bit more aggressive than this. And then we do have our mainspring housing, which has a little bit of a bob on it. Makes it very comfortable to hold and to shoot, I will admit. But once again, I believe this is polymer here. That's what it feels like. It kind of scratches a little bit as well. So very interesting indeed. Now, in terms of magazines, it does come with two 8-round steel magazines. Very typical construction for a 9mm 1911. Nothing terribly special there. And then there is a little bit of a magwell internal there, which is nice, but I would expect that on this price point, which I'll get to at a later time. So, but still very feature rich. And the rest of the ergonomics are actually pretty nice. It's got some soft spots as you move up a little bit forward of the grip, and a cutout under the trigger guard as well, which is nice. It's thoughtful. Now, we do have our grip safety, as you would expect with a 1911 or 2011. It's got a memory bump on it. One thing I did notice, even though all of these edges are softened a bit, that is true, I did find that after a while shooting, I could really feel these. Now, one thing that I'm probably going to do going back to the range, instead of trying to crush up on it as much as I was really trying to ride really high on this, I'm going to actually lower my grip just a smidge to see if perhaps that helps a little bit. I might have been going a little bit too aggressive with it. So time will tell on that. But then we do have a beaver tail, of course, as you would expect. Now, in terms of the thumb safety, It's incredibly articulate. There's actually a pretty good sized paddle, and it is ambidextrous. The paddle's the same on both sides. But that proved to be very good. The only disadvantage to something like that, of course, we got our grip safety. The only disadvantage is the fact that it's difficult to get to your slide release. Not too big of a deal. I use the overhand rack most of the time anyway, but this paddle just kind of got in the way. So, you know, something to consider if you prefer running the slide release. I know a lot of people do. So something to think about for sure. Now, our magazine release, of course, is not ambidextrous. Neither is our slide release, because our slide release doubles as the takedown. Now, it's not very similar to a 1911 takedown, and admittedly, I kind of debated whether I was going to take it down on video or not. Guys, this thing is a chore to take apart, so I've elected not to do it. I will show you, however, and we'll come back to the slide in a bit. It's a bull barrel, and typically with bull barrels, you'll have some sort of hole on your guide rod, and you can put a paper clip or some other device, a tiny little Allen wrench, whatever it is, in there, and then you can release the slide. You can take it apart, and it's actually pretty easy. Well, in this case, it came with a couple of tiny little plastic pieces that you put on the guide rod. I'll admit that does make the disassembly a little bit easier, but those things are a little flimsy, and they can actually come apart while you're trying to put it all back together. It's a big mess. Again, it's not something you want to see on camera, because I will not make it look very good. So just know that this doesn't disassemble quite like your average 1911. It's a little bit more of a chore. It'll take a little bit longer. Once it's all apart, it's pretty easy to clean. So hopefully that's an okay summary for you guys on that. And as we move up the frame, of course, it does say 2011. And then on the other side, we've got our Staccato C and an American flag, by the way. That's pretty cool. And we do have an accessory rail for all of your common toys, as you would expect. Again, it's a carry gun, but you can do your lights, lasers, all of that kind of good stuff. And then on the trigger guard, we do have a little bit of texture on the front. I actually like that, and it matches the rest of the texture here. Again, all of this is polymer. You'll see that there's a little screw hole right here, and it ties into an aluminum chassis. So the rest of the frame, the upper frame, is aluminum, and then we've got our polymer here. So it's a very interesting blend, and a little bit of a cutout underneath the trigger guard. And we'll come back to the trigger a little bit later on in the video. But again, overall, a lot of stuff going on here. By and large, I think the construction is really solid, with just, maybe a couple of little quirks here and there. All right, let's take a walk around the slide of the Staccato C for a moment or two. And one of the first things that you'll notice right off the bat are the serrations, front and rear. And I have to say, not only are they attractive, but they are incredibly useful. They're deep, and they've got a little bit of a pinch to them as well. Now, they're not going to hurt you or anything like that, but there is no question you're going to be able to run this thing without an issue. And I don't know if you noticed or not, but racking this thing is effortless. I mean, it's like glass. I can tell that it's very well hand-fitted. Everything was done with precision. There's no doubt about it. But aside from the serrations, not a lot else going on the slide. Really, I think it's very attractive. Now, I know a lot of 1911 enthusiasts that prefer more a GI model are probably not going to like this as much. Now, as we move up the slide, you'll notice these sights. We've got front fiber optic right here. This is actually a pretty thin post. In fact, it's hard for the camera to actually catch a glimpse of it, but it proved to be very useful in slow fires. I started to speed up a little bit. It was harder to pick up, to be honest with you. I like something a little bit bigger, a little bit brighter than that. But again, at slow fire, they proved to be very useful. And then our rear sight's going to be all serrated, all blacked out. I like that quite a bit. I'm starting to appreciate that sight lineup more and more as time goes on. So overall, I like them. They're Dawson Precisions. They've got a little bit of a ledge here. Again, it's a defensive gun, so one-handed manipulations might be an issue. So overall, I think the slide styling is actually pretty good. And overall, the package is really attractive. The shooting experience with the Staccato C was not without its challenges. I chose to blend slow fire and fast fire to see how the C would respond. At slow pace, it was uber accurate. The sight picture is fantastic with that nice thin fiber optic front sight and the blacked out rear. They were point of aim, point of impact no matter the distance up to 50 feet. The slide is buttery smooth, and racking it was actually a pleasure. Yeah, I know, it's a little weird, but hey, it's the little things. The thumb safety is articulate and easy to manage, though because the safety paddles are big, they prevented me from running the slide release effectively. The contours at the back of the thumb safety also proved to be less than desirable after about 250 rounds. On the topic of ergos, part of my routine is doing a lot of handling prior to any range time to get acquainted with the gun that I'm testing. During that time, I thought the Staccato C felt amazing. In practical shooting, however, there are subtle yet noticeable edges that prove to be, let's just say, not perfect. I plan to return to the range with the C and lower my grip a little to see if that changes my mind. All of that said, aside from it being a mediocre session from yours truly, it's still quite a shooter. Alright, let's take a look at the trigger of the Staccato C for a moment or two. Right off the bat, you'll notice it is skeletonized, but it is also polymer like the rest of this part of the frame, which I find very interesting. Some people might not like that. It's proven to be very good, very solid. I haven't found it to be wobbly or anything like that, and you'll notice it's actually adjustable. There's a little Allen screw in there. Now, I've been running this out of the box. I've not made any adjustments to it whatsoever. I haven't found that it really needs it, but let's take a look at the trigger pull and see how this guy does. So there's your take up right there to a wall. There's basically almost nothing there. And then our brake, oh, that brake is fantastic. Just over 2 pounds. And then our reset, there's your reset, incredibly short, but it's audible, it's tactile. And then we're back out to the start. There's very little movement in this trigger all told. So we'll do this again. We've got our take up. There's your brake right there. Look, that trigger just doesn't move hardly at all. And then we've got our reset and a follow-up. Boy, I'll tell you what, man, this trigger out of the box is a screamer. There is no doubt about that at all. So guys, what do I think of the STI Staccato C overall? Well, overall, I like it. I think there's a very interesting design going on here, especially combining polymer, aluminum, and steel, and it seems to work pretty well with this. The trigger out of the box is phenomenal, although I would expect that with a higher-end 1911. There's no doubt about that. The slide serrations are great, and the sights are fantastic, although I'd prefer a slightly bigger fiber optic. That's me, not the gun. I can't blame the gun for that. And I want to spend some more time with this at the range because, again, I found some of the contours at the back not quite as pleasing. Again, I tend to blame me, not the gun. So I'm going to adjust my grip a little bit. I'll offer some thoughts at a later time on that as time goes on. But overall, again, it's got a lot to offer. Now, a couple of things. The price on this, MSRP, is $14.95, so that's a pretty hefty chunk of change. And they say that it's the world's best shooting carry gun. Well, I don't know. I'll leave that up to you guys. It definitely performs. It does its job. Now, it's 8 rounds plus 1 in the pipe, so there are some questions. Is the price worth it for a carry gun? Is that capacity enough for you? And I think for a lot of people, it probably is. For some people, it definitely isn't. Just depends on your perspective. But it's very interesting for sure. So guys, be sure to leave some comments down below. Let me know your experience with STI or other guns like that. I'm always curious about your experiences and love talking with you guys about this stuff. Otherwise, thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.